Is that really the main driver of why we've seen this sort of massive divide between, the 1% and basically the rest of the population, or what are your thoughts there?
I guess there's three reasons. I think one reason is artificially low interest rates. If you had free market interest rates, if the Fed didn't set the interest rate in the US, but rather the market set the interest rate, my suspicion is that the interest rate would be 2.5% or 3% above the real rate of inflation, not the CPI stated rate of inflation. Artificially low interest rates penalize savers, middle-class savers, and they benefit investors. They benefit people that have access to credit and access to the knowledge as to how to employ it. In other words, they benefit me, but they penalize middle-income savers. And people in the last 40 or 45 years who have had access to credit and the education necessarily to employ credit, at least in the period 1982 to 2022, have done very well, myself included. Those people who haven't had access to credit or haven't had the knowledge base necessary to employ it have had challenges. And those people who relied on traditional methods to get ahead, including savings, have been penalized by deposit interest rates that were lower than would otherwise have been the course. So yes, I think that artificially low interest rates have been an important part in the demarcation, the economic demarcation between the 1% conservatively, probably more like 5%, and the 95%. I think another point has been the fact that we lost sight during a period of economic boom that you had to develop specific skill sets to get ahead. You make money by delivering value to people. The service that you sell or the good that you sell has to deliver enough value to the consumer that he or she willingly parts with money. The idea that many people in the economy have is that you trade time for payment. There are a lot of people who don't have the disconnect between the utility that you create in your job and the way that you get compensated. The economy was strong enough and benign enough for a period of time that people could just show up and collect their checks. That period of time is no longer true. It was particularly true, of course, in the West. But in terms of globalization, what we've learned is that there are a bunch of people in other parts of the world who are willing to do things that we used to consider to be our sole province, and they're willing to do them better, and they're willing to do them for less money. The idea that an auto worker in Western Europe or the United States who is 55 or 60 years old can employ capital better at $70 an hour than a 24-year-old can employing that same capital in India or China is fallacious. And I think that the rank and file of the citizenry needs to reestablish the connection in their own mind between the value that they contribute at work and the way that they're compensated. And I don't think that that's true. And I think it's going to be a very rude awakening to people who haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And was there a third one, or those were the?
I think those are the important
ones. Okay.
I think that there is a sad tendency by people to believe that the government is there somehow to help them. I look particularly at the United States, where I'm resident. And when I talk to other Americans, they believe that the whole panoply of social safety nets, the whole panoply of entitlements that Americans of my generation have enjoyed will continue to be available. And I think that's wrong. Sadly, the on-balance sheet liability, which is to say the debt to bondholders in the United States, now exceeds $35 trillion, over 110% of GDP. But much more challenging, the off-balance sheet liabilities of the US government, which is to say mostly entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, federal pensions, military pensions, that sort of thing. The net present value, not the nominal value of that debt, exceeds $100 trillion, which is to say it's arithmetically unsustainable. The on-balance sheet liabilities, which are $35 trillion, grow in excess of $2 trillion a year. In other words, they aren't getting paid down, they're getting made worse. The Congressional Budget Office suggests that the accretion of the unfunded deficit in the net present value of entitlements is increasing by something like $4 trillion a year. This social obligation that we have to each other, or rather, that the spenders have to the savers, is completely unsustainable, and it won't be sustained. People who believe that the government has either the responsibility or the ability to discharge the obligations that they have to themselves or their families are in for a very rude awakening. It's not going to happen. People at your age, Anthony, need to understand that the whole collection of entitlements that my generation have enjoyed have been in some sense fraud. They've been an income transfer, in effect, to us, the people who voted ourselves all kinds of cool benefits, but forgot to pay for them. We got the benefit, and we're leaving you the responsibility. You have the right to feel aggrieved, but in addition to feeling aggrieved, you need to understand that the level of benefits that we enjoyed are not going to be available to you, and you need to plan accordingly.
Yeah, I think, if I look at maybe people my age, they sort of understand that. I think the challenge is maybe the people, 20 years older, sort of late 40s and 50s, where, if you think about when they're, 30, 40 years time, these pensions can't be afforded. So what happens then? That's really going to be the challenge.
Well, I suspect we're going deep down to a rabbit hole that may not be of interest to non-U.S. investors. But I think that Social Security, as an example, will become means tested. People who paid into it for 50 years like me won't like the fact that they're going to be excluded from it, having paid into it. But that's what's going to happen.